What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk to you about NIO. I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. So starting off with macro data, we have absolutely nothing coming out that's going to really move Chinese stocks. Aside from that, it is going to be more linked to companies' technicals as well as companies putting out their earnings. So this is what is coming out this week. Big ones, Alibaba, and then yours truly. So when it comes down to NIO's earnings, this is where things could get very interesting. So for instance, these are some of the key metrics. So negative 22 cents for the earnings per share, 3.14 billion for the revenue, and over the last 90 days, no changes to the earnings per share. And that kind of matches with what I've mentioned in previous videos on how analysts seem to just not care about NIO lately, which is rather odd. But nonetheless, I do feel in this earnings and how Wall Street's generally been is that they're looking for future guidance. That's one of the biggest things that they're caring about. So I feel like NIO, even though historically it does do fairly well on the earnings per share, I feel like it could get a little bit of a pass. So again, something to keep in mind. Aside from that though, these are some of the little bit more of a deeper kind of viewpoint. So the earnings per share, negative 23 cents. That does work out to be 33.24% year-over-year growth. Low end of negative 25 cents, high end of negative 21. And then aside from that, for the revenue, that 3.14 billion, that works out to be 21.71% year-over-year growth. Low end of 3.04, high end of 3.2. That's based on 6 analysts' estimates. And you can kind of see as well, I guess, the foreseeable future. So Q4, Q1, and so forth. This is where you're seeing solid double or possibly even triple digit year-over-year growth. So that's a good thing. But like I said, all of that is going to be based largely on what NIO gives for future guidance. And this is something that I've kind of complained about in the past, is that NIO has always given very, very high estimates for itself. And it's, I guess, nothing really wrong with that. If you set high expectations, set the bar high, but the moral of the story is you need to hit them. If not, then the market's going to punish. And some people somehow don't agree with me on that. So keep in mind, if a company, any company, doesn't matter if it's NIO or Joe Blow's stock, if a company says, hey, I'm going to do X amount of revenue and X amount of deliveries, the market automatically prices that in. If that company is unable to fulfill that, then technically, yeah, the stock price does go down. That is exactly how the market does work. It's very interesting to see some people in my comments saying, nope, that's not accurate, but it is. Just on a side note. So they've given a lot of estimates for the Firefly, L90, ES8, Onvo in general. So there's a lot of those milestones that need to be hit. And if they kind of signal that they might not, then unfortunately, I think the market's going to really, again, hit them quite hard. And I think overall, from what we've seen, there is a lot of demand. So reasonably, it is fair to assume that they will hit all their targets. And from what we've seen so far on data points, it does look like we'll be kind of seeing maybe a little bit more growing demand. One thing as well that did come out over the weekend was saying that because of, I guess, excessive demand of the L90, that they're going to be pushing the launch of the L80 back to between Q1 and Q2 of 2026. So I guess this is a little bit more of a positive / negative. And the reason why I say negative is clearly they're bringing up some certain constraints. Positive is clearly that there's sufficient amount of demand for the L90. So this is going to be a kind of a love-hate relationship or love-hate type of news that the market's going to digest. So I personally see the L90 being a big success, and I think it's kind of justified to push the L80 back, in my opinion, but what do I know in life? Aside from that, the only other thing that came out over the weekend was posted by Steve, and it goes to show that NIO is worth looking at, right? So you have the CEO of BYD looking at the products. So that's honestly pretty good. This should be kind of framed and all that fun stuff. So let me know your general thoughts on that in the comments below. But aside from all that fun stuff, it is going to, like I said, just largely be on NIO's earnings. One thing to take note of though is that because of Black Friday, so in case you do not know, Thursday the market does close at 1 because of Black Friday. but it's an interesting transition. So for instance, on Friday, the market is open, but most Americans kind of take the day off, a lot of big banks and so forth. So when it comes down to shorts, it'll be interesting to see. So for instance, if shorts are active, then it is fair to assume that it is Canadian or possibly European or Asian entities that is shorting NIO. If shorts are quiet and they're not doing anything on Friday, then it is fair to assume that normally it's American entities shorting NIO. So it's a very interesting thing. This only happens generally, I think, like once a year, sometimes as well around Christmas when the market's open on the 26th in some years. But Black Friday, this is the one time of year that you can actually have some insight to see who is shorting a stock. So very interesting. So stay tuned for my video on Friday. Aside from that, going into this upcoming week, 11.43% of the free floats being shorted, works to be 158 million shares overall being shorted. DTC sitting at 2.08 days. So it does signal that shorts are still very overextended. Shorts on Friday did take advantage and they did return 2.24 million shares. From a bull standpoint, you see a consensus for it to be roughly around that 6 to 650. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub $5. Current expected new move for NIO's earnings, again, based on the options, is 8.21% in either direction. Still volatile, but not as much as it was originally anticipated, which was, I think, 14%, give or take. But this 8.21% does work out to be 46 cents in either direction. So for those of you that are playing NIO's earnings through options, let me know what you're doing. Strike price, expiry date, where do you realistically see things going? Aside from all of that, with it closing on Friday at 558, it is trading between this S2 and this S3. So in comparison to a lot of other growth stocks, NIO regrettably is lagging, but 528 is that strong support. 570 followed by 597 is going to be the next strong target / resistance. If this 528 does fail to hold, then you have 417. I realistically don't see that being on the table at all, in my opinion. So I feel like NIO's earnings is going to be seen as positive and really push higher. So just kind of take a mental note in a lot of those if you're, again, dollar cost averaging or whatever else. Aside from all of that fun stuff on the actual chart, this is not NIO, so you guys don't care about that. But on the actual chart, things aren't really looking too great. So because of the craziness that we've seen, it is below right now the 100-day moving average. So the 200 is sitting at 499, and then the 100-day moving average is sitting at 599. So most likely leading into their earnings, it's going to be wedge bound between there. And because of their earnings, it's either going to be enough to push it above that 100-day moving average, causing a nice kind of push higher, a V-shaped recovery, or be the dagger that really brings it to roughly around that 200-day moving average. It's all going to come down to that, in my opinion. Aside from that, though, stochastic RSI is very, very oversold. So if they have some positive things to really bring up in their earnings, which most likely is, well, I know I didn't bring it up for the guidance aspect, but their chip. So supposedly, unofficially, I guess, they did get their first customer. That is a very big deal. So if they use that as a good talking point, that could be a good catalyst in among itself as well to prompt a certain level of buying. So I think NIO has been just hit way too much in a short span. Yes, it did fail to get above some key resistance levels, which normally does prompt a certain level of consolidation, but this is just craziness. So in my opinion, I do feel that there's going to be a lot more upside than down, but from what you can see from the flow, it's been kind of getting moved through algorithmic trading. And that's been a very common scenario over the last several weeks. So all of this, if you want to think about it like that, is rather artificial. So let me know your general thoughts on NIO. Where do you feel that NIO is going to go post earnings? Do you think it's going to be a success, or do you think it's going to be a flop? Looking at the market position on a side note, you do see a good amount of willing buyers up until around that 530, and then it kind of drops off. So if NIO does again flop on their earnings, you could see some negative consolidation as well on the side note, so don't be kind of surprised by that. One final thing I do want to share with you though, pop over to my stacked account. I do have a Black Friday promotion where it is $10 a month and you get swing trades that are on point, so definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. Aside from that though, I do put out a lot of good day trades, swing trades, so definitely worthwhile to kind of check that out. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.